I was in the midst of a whirlwind of emotions as we were finishing up the wedding preparations. Emily and I had been together for 5 years, and finally, the big day was just a few hours away. The living room was filled with boxes, lists, and decorations, and the scent of fresh flowers permeated the air, mingling with the anxiety and anticipation. Emily, with her usual calmness, was arranging the floral decorations, her delicate hands carefully selecting each flower, while I tried to figure out how to set up the wedding arch without making more of a mess than I already was. "Mike, can you get the tape from the kitchen?" Emily asked, not lifting her eyes from the flowers, her voice sounding like a familiar and comforting melody. "Sure, love," I replied, trying not to trip over any more boxes on the way, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts about the future we were about to build together. It was at that moment that the front door opened and Lisa walked in, her warm smile lighting up the room. Lisa and I had been friends since college, and she had always been by my side during the most important moments of my life. She had offered to help with the preparations, and I was grateful for her presence. "Look who's here!" Emily said, hugging Lisa. "So glad you came." "I wouldn't miss this for anything," Lisa replied, her voice sounding a bit more tense than usual. While Emily and Lisa exchanged a few words, I returned to the living room with the tape in hand. Lisa approached me, and for a brief moment, our eyes met in a way that made me feel a twinge of concern. There was something in her eyes that I couldn't decipher. "Hey, do you have a minute?" she whispered, pulling me to a corner of the room. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, trying to hide my apprehension. "I want to talk to you in private," she said, glancing at Emily, who was too busy to notice our little escape. We went to the backyard, where the cool night breeze enveloped us. Lisa seemed visibly disturbed. Her eyes were bright, and her hands trembled slightly. "Mike, I don't know how to start," she began, her voice breaking a little. "Lisa, what's going on? You're scaring me," I said, trying to stay calm. She took a deep breath, and then the words came out all at once. "I've always been in love with you, since college. I never said anything because you seemed so happy with Emily, and I didn't want to ruin that. But now, with the wedding coming up, I just can't keep it to myself anymore." I was completely shocked. Her words echoed in my mind, and I couldn't find a response. I looked at Lisa, trying to process everything she had said. She was there, vulnerable, with tears in her eyes. "Lisa, I began, but the words failed me. "I know this is unfair, especially now, but I needed you to know. I love you, Mike. I always have," she said, looking directly into my eyes. I was speechless, and the only thing I could do was hug her. I felt her tears soaking my shirt, and all I could think was how surreal this was. "I don't know what to say," I finally managed to murmur. "You don't have to say anything now. I just needed you to know," she replied, slowly pulling away. We went back inside, where Emily was still busy with the preparations. Lisa made a quick excuse and left, leaving me with a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I spent the rest of the evening helping Emily, but my mind was racing. Every time she smiled, I felt a tightness in my chest, knowing the secret I now carried. When we finally went to bed, Emily quickly fell asleep, exhausted from the full day. I, however, lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Lisa's words kept echoing in my mind. "I love you, Mike. I always have." How could I continue as if nothing had happened? How could I marry Emily tomorrow, knowing Lisa's feelings? The night was long, and sleep did not come. I tossed and turned in bed countless times, trying to find an answer, a solution. But nothing seemed right. All I knew was that somehow my life had changed forever that night. And now I had to confront my feelings and make a decision that could change the course of my life forever. The next morning, the Los Angeles sun seemed to shine brighter, but for me, it felt like a shadow hung over all the wedding preparations. I tried to act normally, helping Emily with the final details. But my mind was racing with Lisa's confession. Every smile I gave, every word of encouragement that came out of my mouth felt forced and hollow. "Mike, could you check if the flowers have arrived?" Emily asked, with that sweet tone that always captivated me. "Sure, love. I'll go right now," I replied, trying to hide the restlessness in my voice. While I was talking to the florist, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from Lisa. "We need to talk. It's urgent. Meet me at the cafe at 1 p.m. My heart raced. What more could she have to say? Was there something else I needed to hear? During lunch with Emily's parents, my mind was elsewhere. I responded mechanically to questions about the wedding preparations, but my head was focused on the meeting with Lisa. When the clock struck 12:45, I made up an excuse about needing to resolve something for the wedding and hurried out. I arrived at the cafe and saw Lisa sitting at a table in the corner, with a serious expression and an untouched coffee in front of her. I approached and sat down in silence, waiting for her to start talking. "Mike, I know I caught you off guard yesterday," she began, her eyes fixed on mine. "But I needed to tell you. I couldn't let this secret consume me any longer." "Lisa, why now? Why on the eve of my wedding?" I asked, trying to control the mixture of frustration and confusion inside me. "I couldn't take it anymore. Seeing you so happy with Emily, knowing I never had the courage to tell you how I feel, it destroyed me inside," she replied, with tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I wanted you to know that my love for you has always been real." She took a letter out of her bag and placed it in front of me. "I wrote this years ago, but I never had the courage to give it to you. I think now is the time." I took the letter with trembling hands. I opened the envelope and began to read, feeling a wave of emotions wash over me. The letter was a detailed narrative of all the moments we shared over the years, from college to the present day. She described how every little gesture of mine made her fall more in love, and how she fought against her feelings not to disrupt our friendship. When I finished reading, I was in shock. I didn't know what to think or feel. I looked at Lisa, who was anxiously awaiting my reaction. "Lisa, I don't know what to say," I began, the words coming out hesitantly. "This is a lot to process. I've always seen you as a friend, a sister, and now I don't know what to think." "I understand, Mike. I'm not asking you to change your life for me. I just wanted you to know the truth. I couldn't live with this secret anymore," she said, wiping the tears that were streaming down her face. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both absorbing the gravity of the situation. Finally, I stood up and said, "I need some time to think. This is all very complex." "Of course, Mike. Take all the time you need," she replied, with a look of understanding and sadness. I left the cafe, feeling my world turn upside down. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on the wedding preparations, but Lisa's letter and her words echoed in my mind. Every moment with Emily now felt weighted with a burden I didn't know how to handle. That night, lying in bed with Emily sleeping beside me, my doubts and uncertainties haunted me. Was I about to make a colossal mistake? Or was Lisa just a temporary distraction, a spark of emotion in a moment of vulnerability? I closed my eyes, trying to find some peace, but found only more questions. And deep down, I knew I would have to confront these feelings before the big day. It was a sunny morning in Los Angeles, but I felt an enormous weight on my shoulders. Lisa's confession had turned my world upside down. After a sleepless night, I decided I needed to talk to someone I trusted, someone who could help me sort out my thoughts. That's when I remembered Tom, my childhood friend, always sensible and honest. I called Tom, and he promptly agreed to meet me at a nearby cafe. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting with a cup of coffee in hand and a welcoming smile on his face. "Mike, what's going on? You sounded pretty desperate on the phone," he said as I sat down. I sighed deeply before beginning to explain everything. Tom, you won't believe this. On the eve of my wedding, Lisa confessed that she's been in love with me for years. Tom's eyes widened in surprise. Man, that's serious. And how do you feel about all this? Confused. Very confused. I love Emily, but Lisa, she's my best friend. And now, knowing how she feels about me, I'm starting to question everything, I confessed. Tom placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. Look, Mike, that's a lot to process. Maybe you should take some time to think. Step away from both of them for a few hours. It might help clear your mind. I agreed with Tom's suggestion. It was exactly what I needed. I decided to go to the beach, a place that always brought me peace and clarity. I walked along the sand, watching the waves crash on the shore, and let my memories flow. I recalled the moments I had with Lisa, like when we were teenagers and spent entire afternoons talking about our dreams and fears. She had always been there for me, through every phase of my life. But at the same time, I thought of Emily, the woman I chose to spend the rest of my life with. She brought me a happiness I had never felt before. I spent hours on the beach, immersed in thoughts and memories. When I finally returned to the hotel, I was more confused than ever. Upon entering the room, I found Emily sitting on the bed with a worried look. She noticed my tension immediately. "Mike, what's going on? You've been acting strange since yesterday," she asked, her voice full of concern. I knew I couldn't lie to her. I took a deep breath and sat down beside her. "Emily, I need to tell you something. Lisa confessed that she's in love with me." Emily's face transformed into an expression of pain and disbelief. "What? When did this happen?" "Last night. She said she's been in love with me for years. I'm so confused, Emily. I don't know what to think." She was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. "Mike, I don't know what to say. This is a shock to me. We're a day away from our wedding, and you're telling me this?" "I know, and I'm sorry. I just couldn't hide this from you," I responded, feeling the pain in her voice. Without saying another word, Emily stood up and started packing her things. "I need some time. I'm going to stay at a friend's house tonight. We need to think about all this." As she left the room, I felt as if my heart was being ripped out of my chest. I stayed there, alone, trying to process what had just happened. Shortly after, there was a knock on the door. It was Lisa. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "Mike, I heard you told Emily. How is she?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Devastated, Lisa. She went to a friend's house." "I'm a wreck, too," I replied, feeling the tension in the air. "I didn't want to cause this, Mike. I just couldn't hide my feelings anymore," she said, tears streaming down her face. The discussion that followed was intense. We talked about our feelings, our doubts, and everything that was at stake. At the height of the discussion, there was a moment of tenderness, an almost uncontrollable urge to kiss her. But I held back at the last second, reminding myself of Emily and the commitment we had made. That's when my phone rang. It was Emily. She wanted to meet at the park where we had our first date. I knew that conversation would be decisive. I left Lisa at the hotel and went to meet Emily, my heart heavy. She was there, on the same bench where we sat for the first time, with a grave expression on her face. "Mike, I've thought a lot. We need time. We're postponing the wedding," she said firmly. I agreed, knowing that decision was the most sensible one at that moment. My heart was divided, and I needed to understand my feelings before moving forward. We sat together in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. We knew the road ahead would be difficult, but we hoped that somehow we would find a way to resolve everything. That night, the hotel room felt emptier than ever. Emily had decided to spend the night at a friend's house, leaving me alone with my turbulent thoughts and emotions. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, trying to understand how my life had turned from a fairy tale about to have a happy ending into a complicated and painful drama. Then I heard a soft knock on the door. My heart raced as I got up to answer, already knowing who would be on the other side. I opened the door, and there was Lisa, with an expression that mixed concern and determination. "Mike, I needed to see how you are," she said, her voice soft but laden with anxiety. "Lisa, I don't know what to say," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "Can we talk for a bit? I feel like we need to clear all this up," she asked, her eyes pleading for an answer. I invited her in, and we sat on the small sofa in the room. There was a moment of awkward silence before Lisa finally spoke. "Mike, I never wanted to cause this confusion in your life. I just couldn't keep this inside me anymore. I needed you to know," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I understand, Lisa, but do you have any idea how much this has complicated things? I'm about to marry Emily, and now everything seems so uncertain," I responded, feeling the frustration growing. "I know, and I'm so sorry for that, but I can't ignore my feelings either. I love you, Mike. I've always loved you. And when I saw you about to get married, I realized I couldn't stay silent any longer," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. The tension in the air was palpable. I wanted to hug her, to console her, but I knew that would only make things more complicated. Instead, I remained where I was, trying to process everything. "Lisa, I don't know what to do. I love Emily. She's amazing and has always been there for me. But you're my best friend. This confuses everything," I said, my voice faltering. She moved a little closer, her face so near to mine that I could feel her breath. "I know it's difficult, Mike, but I needed to be honest. I needed to give you the chance to choose, to understand what you really feel," she said, with an intensity that shook me. It was at that moment that I almost lost control. Our faces were so close that for a second I thought about kissing her, but something inside me made me pull back at the last second. I stood up quickly, trying to put some distance between us. I can't do this, Lisa. Not like this," I said, my voice filled with conflict. Lisa looked devastated, but before she could respond, my phone rang. It was Emily. I hesitated before answering, but I knew I needed to talk to her. "Hi, Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mike, can we meet at the park where we had our first date? We need to talk," she said, her voice calm but laden with a sadness that cut through me. "Of course, I'll be there in 15 minutes, I replied, feeling an even heavier weight descend upon me. I hung up the phone and looked at Lisa, who was standing ready to leave. "I need to go, Lisa. Emily wants to talk," I said, trying to keep my composure. She nodded, her eyes full of understanding and pain. "I understand, Mike. Just think about what you really want and what makes you happy," she said before leaving. As I left the hotel, my emotions were in complete disarray. I walked to the park, each step heavy with the burden of the decision I needed to make. When I arrived, I saw Emily sitting on a bench, the same bench where we sat on our first date. She looked up as she saw me, and her gaze was filled with deep sadness. "Mike, I've thought a lot about all this, and I think we need time. We need to postpone the wedding," she said, her voice trembling. I felt my world collapse. I didn't know what to say, but I knew she was right. Things couldn't continue as they were. "Emily, I understand. Let's do that. We need time to figure everything out," I replied, feeling a mix of relief and despair. I could barely concentrate at work. Lisa and Emily occupied all my thoughts, like they were engaged in a silent duel inside my head. Every time I tried to focus on spreadsheets and reports, the image of Lisa confessing her love for me or Emily's devastated expression would surface, completely distracting me. The days dragged on, and I found myself trapped in a vortex of doubts and conflicting emotions. Emily decided to travel to her parents' house in the countryside, ostensibly to take some time to reflect. This left me alone in Los Angeles, with Lisa seemingly becoming more present in my life. One Friday afternoon, I received a message from her inviting me to dinner at her house. I hesitated for a moment but ended up accepting. Perhaps talking more with Lisa would help clear my mind. That evening, when I arrived at Lisa's house, I was greeted by a warm atmosphere and a carefully set table. She had prepared my favorite dish, something that demonstrated how well she knew me. We sat at the table, and after a few minutes of casual conversation, Lisa finally addressed the topic that hung between us like a storm cloud. "Mike, I know I put you in a difficult situation," she began, her voice trembling but determined. "But I couldn't hide what I feel for you anymore. I've loved you for years, and seeing you about to marry someone else, it's unbearable." I looked at her, trying to find the right words. "Lisa, I don't know what to say. You are my best friend, always have been, and I love Emily, but all of this has left me so confused."
She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on mine. "I understand, Mike, but you need to know how much you mean to me. You've always been there, in good times and bad, and I've always been there for you. I just need you to know that."
Silence settled between us, heavy with unspoken feelings. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from Emily. "Mike, I need to talk to you urgently. Please, come home." My heart raced. "Lisa, I have to go. Emily needs me." She nodded with an expression of sadness and understanding. "Go, Mike. Do what you need to do." When I arrived at Emily's house, I was greeted by a tense atmosphere. She was sitting on the couch, with a grave expression on her face. I sat beside her, feeling the weight of the moment. "Emily, what happened?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting mine. "Mike, I found out I'm pregnant." The ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. "Pregnant?" I repeated, unable to process the information. She nodded, tears beginning to stream down her face. "Yes, and I don't know what to do. With everything happening between us, with Lisa, I'm so lost." I moved closer to her, taking her hands in mine. "Emily, we will figure this out together. I promise. I need some time to think." She looked at me, her eyes full of pain and hope. "I need time too, Mike, but we need to make a decision soon. We can't avoid this." I nodded, feeling the enormity of the situation weigh down on me. "I know. We will handle this, I promise." I left Emily's house feeling more confused than ever. The love for my fiancé, the conflicting feelings for Lisa, and now the responsibility of a new life were intertwined in an impossible web to untangle. I knew I was facing the most difficult decision of my life, one that would not only change my future but also that of everyone around me. As I walked through the quiet streets of Los Angeles, I realized that any choice I made would have profound and lasting implications. And, at that moment, all I could do was hope that time and reflection would guide me in the right direction. Thank you for watching our story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comment and tell us what you think of this exciting story.